This podcast was produced under the authority of the Podcast Police, who may or may not have investigated the host and guests prior to broadcasting. Any unlawful statements will be investigated further and persecuted to the fullest extent of the podcast law.
Hey, it's Troy Holden, and welcome back to the VO Life. And here we are. And I'm probably going to step on a toe or two today, and I don't mean to do that because that's the last thing you want to do is make enemies, right? Nobody wants to have enemies, and that's not what I'm trying to do here. But I have done something over the last week that just made me really realize how we get off track sometimes with gear and audio, right? I mean, do you guys ever do that? You just get off track with it and don't understand why. If you've been doing this a while, you're going to know what I'm talking about. But to the folks that are newer, you're going to be scratching your head maybe. And I want you to know that this is one of those things that is, it's a catch-22. So we talk about a lot of times, you got to have your space right. You've got to have a space that's not reverby, it's not boxy, it's not this, that, and the other. And people say, well, I'm doing the best I can. I put this up, put that up, but I can always do this to make it better before I send it. And let's first draw a line between what is what, okay? There's two different things. There is audio that you send out to a client who is going to do something with that audio. And then there is finished audio that you might deliver to a client. You may even put the music with it if you know what you're doing. You may do all of that. That's different. What we're talking about today is what you should be using for auditions and what you should be using when you're delivering and when you're hooked onto a Source Connect, a live session, and you're being directed. What should you be doing to that audio when you send it out? Nothing. Don't do anything. Really? You got to be kidding me. There's no, I can't leave those little clicks in there. I can't leave those breaths in there. You can. They'll take them out if they want them out. That's what the audio engineer's getting paid for. But if you're delivering something to an end user, let's clean it up. Let's get the noise out. Let's make it the best we can. But don't do that or overdo that on your auditions. You're going to hear, people all the time talk about they can sell you a stack or, some pre-built stuff you can put into whatever DAW you have. And it will help. And do I use some things? Sure. There's times I'll put NS1 in there and I'll put it on about 4 because it might get rid of something that's floating around in there that I don't need everybody to hear it. But I don't go in there and over EQ, over compress, take every little thing out, make sure all the, the gaps are all the same space and blah, blah, blah. Don't do that. You don't have to do that. And let me tell you about my lesson learned this week. And this was told to me a couple years ago because I was working with someone on my sound and as I was redoing and moving and I wanted it to be good and I was getting some new shortcuts in Adobe Audition. And it was really, really good. It really, really helped me. It sped my production up. But what I kept asking was, do I need to get a better interface? Do I need to get this or that? And they were like, no, you don't need another interface. Quit worrying about your interface. You got a good microphone. You got a good sound. Quit worrying about that stuff. And because we keep seeing it on Facebook, I just had to have an Apollo. I had to have it. Everybody had one, and I thought their audio sounded better than mine. And so I got one. I got the Apollo Solo, and I uploaded the Avalon preamp into it, and it sounded okay. It might have had a little more something to it, but did it really? So I went back and took an audition from 2 weeks ago and took one I just did yesterday on the Apollo and I played them back to back. And, the Apollo one was a little louder, but I could have raised the output on the other one. It wasn't any cleaner. It wasn't really any crisper. It had a little bit of more presence in a way, but that's nothing that the audio engineer couldn't do on his side. You know what I'm saying? He may not want me to do that, because what if he didn't want that in there? What if he wanted a different sound, and now I've done something that he can't back out? Something to think about. If they can't fix it, and Tim Tippett's, who is fantastic with audio, has said, you cannot unscramble scrambled eggs. And it's the same way if you overcompress or overdo it. And if you go back and listen to some of his stuff on YouTube, you'll hear him say clean raw audio is just cleaned up raw audio. You don't want to do too much. You do a little bit, a little EQ maybe, a little of that noise removal like within S1, but just don't overdo it to where it changes your natural audio. I've produced a lot of spots. I produced my own spots, my own demo spots. I produce spots for other people. I have one client that I do front to back. It's HVAC commercials, and I do everything, all the effects, all the everything, music, effects, whatever they want. And I have to mix it, and it's got to be right. And yes, that has compression, and it has things done to it. When I mix these podcasts, I'm going to do some things to that because it's going out to be heard, and I want it to sound as good as possible. But when you're auditioning and when you're submitting things to someone else who is going to do something with it, they are going to put it in the video. They are going to put it on a radio spot. They are going to put it in an e-learning thing. Ask, do you have the ability to clean up the audio? Will you be doing compression and all that? Or do you want me to provide you 2 files? Would you like me to send you a raw file and then one that I've cleaned up? And I have people all the time say, if you could do both, that would be great, because you know what you could be doing? You could be saving them some work. And if it's easy and quick for you to do. And I have some presets that I would apply for the cleaned up audio, and then the raw, I'm just going to send it pretty much raw. And that's it. I'm not going at it to, blow them away with the sound. I'm trying to blow them away with the audition, the read, the connection. Did I do what they asked? Did I feel their copy? Did I become what they needed me to be? If you are focusing on the sound when you send that off, you're going to lose it. You're not going to get the audition. The audition is the job. The audition is the art. The audition is everything. And a lot of people say, I hate to audition. I hate it. Well, it's great. I book work without auditioning sometimes. I'm not going to say I love to audition, but there are times I enjoy it. You get good copy in, and trying to get yourself into that story and becoming that copy, and what you're doing with that copy, and finding those moments in that film and in that 30 seconds or that 60 seconds or however long it is, and finding your moments and really standing out, and then the hair stands up on the back of your neck because that's what it's about. It still doesn't mean you're going to get that job, but it means you gave it your best. And then if you've got a nice quiet room, you got a good mic, a good interface, it's going to sound great. It's going to be what they want. It's going to be pristine, or they can work with it, and it's raw audio that they can dial in to where they want it to be. And, I'm not trying to say that anybody's selling you some presets or a stack or whatever you want to call it. I'm not trying to say that's wrong, because they can hear your room, and if you're not an audio person, they can help you at least fix it. But just remember what you're doing and what you're sending out, that it's not overdone. And most of those guys, they're going to tell you the exact same thing. Let's fix your room. Let's fix your mic placement. Let's get all of that as good as we can get it. And then we might drop in a couple of things. We might EQ you just a little bit. We might do this just a little bit. And does that mean it'll always work? Well, if you don't change anything, it will. Don't move your monitors around. Don't change your mic placement. Don't add a bunch of bass traps after the fact, because it will change the sound of your room. Your room can change. Heck, you can get a different chair. You can take the rug off the floor. You can do, here I put up more curtains behind me. Luckily, it didn't really change anything, and you just have to work with what you have. So I understand you might need the presets. But of course, your ultimate goal is to have your room treated to a point to where your raw audio can be sent to your agents and all without you having to tweak and tweak and tweak. And I have people ask me a lot, do you take out breaths? That's a tough question because it really depends. If it's one of those big gasping breaths, I'll tamp it down. If it's too much of a gap in there, I'll tamp it down and shorten that gap a little bit to where it's not as crazy sounding. But most of the time, I try not to have that happen. I try to breathe through my nose as much as I can when my sinuses aren't terrible. I try to turn away. You hear that? Turn away from the mic a little and get over here a little and take that breath and come back. You're going to hear breaths in this podcast. I'm not going to edit these breaths out. It's too much trouble. But we work at reducing all of that as we get better at this. And in the beginning, man, I was gasping and breathing terribly. And the more I worked at it, and the more work I did, the better that gets. So don't feel like you're in a hole and that's never going to get better. It will get better. You do have to work at it and you have to be aware of it and you have to think about it every time you are reading. For me to breathe through my nose when I read, it's very hard for me to remember to do that. And if I do it, it is quieter, but I have to be careful because sometimes it'll whistle because I have a deviated septum. And on my left side, it may go and make a noise. I also have a weird thing that goes on with some F words, and not just that F word, but if I say freeze or Frank, my lip will somehow hang on a tooth, and I don't know how it does it, but sometimes it'll make this weird whistle with an F, and I will edit those out because it almost sounds like it goes like that. And I don't want in my words. I want to take that out, and I can always clean those up. There are things that sometimes we have to do. And I've had my dentist work on that tooth because I played it for him, and I said, hear what it's doing, and I said, it's catching right there, and the air's not getting through, and it hangs up on the inside of my lip and makes that noise. And he actually took something and ground or sanded or whatever you want to say between a couple of teeth. And he's done it twice and it hasn't gone away. It's better, but it hasn't gone away. Man, the things we fight, right? And I have to really listen for that because it'll come out. It'll come out in almost everything I do. And sometimes I leave it in there because I'll miss it. And if they hear it, they can take it out. Right? Right. Okay. So let's go back. Sound 101, room first, good treatment, clap and check, get that reverb out, make sure it's not boxy. A bigger room is better. But I know you got to do what you got to do. I had to do it. I had to do a blanket fort, and then I went in a small, like a 4x6 that I built thinking that was what I should do, a booth. Everybody has a booth. You can get in a bigger room. I'm now in about a 7x12 room that has sound panels up and some audio-mute curtains hanging up. And it's not perfect, but it's way better than the booth was. And I'm also now on a 416 Sennheiser shotgun mic, and I think that helps. The mic is not the most important, but these shotgun mics are fantastic if your voice likes it. And a lot of voices like these mics. Do I ever record on another mic? Yes, I have a Sennheiser MK4 that sounds a whole lot like a Neumann 102. It doesn't quite sound like the 103. It's not quite as rich as the 103, but it does sound like the 102. And I have the 102 that, it's kind of like a trophy, and I don't hardly ever take it out. But the MK4 is fantastic for the money. If you say, I have to have the large diaphragm, it's what I want, I got to have one, it's a pretty good mic for the money. And especially if you get it somewhere, you can send it back if it doesn't fit your voice. Remember, with microphones, they work for some people, they sound great. Other people, they don't sound so great on. And you got to find what sounds great for you in your space, and go from there. And that's just what we do. We test, we trial, we do whatever. And again, this is not to say if you are touching up your audio, you're bad. You shouldn't do that. I'm not really trying to put it that way. I'm saying get your room as tight as you can get it where you don't have to. Work on your breathing where you don't have to go take out a ton of breaths. And it really depends on what it is. If it's a 15-second, 30-second, 60-second spot, dadgum skippy, I'm going to clean those breaths up because they're probably going to be slamming that and layering that stuff on top of each other to fit it in there anyway. And there's not going to be any breaths anyway, right? Probably. If it's in a long form like a video sales letter or 10, 12,000 words, I'm not taking those breaths out. They don't like them, they can do it, most likely. Unless they are telling me they want them out and they're going to pay me to take them out. Then, sure, I'll take care of it. Sound is one of the things you're going to pull your hair out with if you're new until you get it right. And once you get it, leave it. You don't have to have the Apollo. I'm not saying the Apollo's bad. A lot of my buddies have them, and their sound is great. But I've been running this Audient ID4 for a long time. And I did take the Avalon that I had bought for the Apollo, and I bounced it into my effects in Audition, where I can just drop it in there with my Audient. What I'm doing on my effects in there, the Audient it doesn't matter. It's going in straight through Audition. So instead of it coming through the interface, it's just in Audition, and I can add it in there. And that's not really any different. The difference is if I'm running that Apollo into Zoom, you're going to hear that sound on Zoom. Does that matter to you? Doesn't matter to me. I've never had anybody on a Zoom call say, I can't hear you and you don't sound as good. Maybe you need to get an Apollo, and I'll tell you another unit that is highly, highly, highly recommended, and I hope I get the model number right, is SSL2. I think it's SSL2, Solid State Logistics 2. I ordered one early on when I first started, and I just couldn't make it work. I'm sure it was my fault. And then I ended up getting the Audient right after that because I had I forget the other brand I had. Anyway, Jake Sanders has it now. He's using it. And I went to the Audient, and then I bought another Audient off somebody that was going to get rid of theirs so I'd have a backup. And I just took the backup that was new, brand new, and started using it, and I put the older one in the cabinet as a backup. And I may eventually buy another Audient, and that older one I may gift it to somebody. They are simple to use. The one thing I didn't like about the Apollo was I was constantly having to push buttons on it. What do you mean? Well, if I wanted to play something back, the mic would still be hot, and I would get feedback. And I had to, you can either hit the pad button, then go over and hit your monitor button and turn your monitor back on. Or if you kept headphones on all the time, it didn't matter. And now I know why some coaches are saying you should do everything with your headphones. I would have to if I kept doing that, because the back and forth and the pushing the buttons drove me nuts. The Audient, I can set it and forget it. and it just does its thing. I might adjust the gain every now and then. The Audient is just like these others. You can pull up a control panel on your screen if you want to do that. It's got the software for that as well. You can set it up to where whatever is going through like Audition and you have the effects in there, you can set it up to do the same thing where it'll feed through Zoom. You have to do that through virtual cabling. I'm just not that slick to do all that. Now, I would assume if you have a session open and you have those effects up on the screen, that may still go through that way. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure. We'll have to get a tech person on and talk about how to do that virtual cabling and how to make it work that way. But I'll just be honest with you. If your room is solid, you're going to sound good on Zoom. You're going to sound good wherever you are. You won't have to worry about it. Don't let sound be a barrier, a sound barrier. You don't want a sound barrier. Don't let that be a barrier. Don't let it overwhelm you. And I've talked about this before on the podcast. It's just been a while. And me going through this experience, setting up this solo, and that doesn't mean I won't ever use this Apollo solo. I probably will. I'm going to wrap it in bubble wrap and put it in with that $50 T4 connector I had to buy, and I'm going to put it up in my cabinet, and it's there if I need it or want to use it. And I may, who knows? I may set up a dual system someday, where it's running something for me and the other one's running something else. Who knows? But don't overthink the gear and don't overthink your sound. Get your room right. Make it simple. You can do this. All right, we've beat that poor old dead horse to death. And speaking of horses, it's about 60 degrees here today. Here we are at the end of March. We've had some rain and stuff come through, and it's kind of been cool. But I need to get outside and check on some things and make sure we've got water and all that for the animals. And, of course, it's scary to go outside this time of year because of the allergies. Every time I go out, I come in sneezing and my eyes are watering and, stuff we don't want to fight as a voice actor. But, I'm looking forward to getting out for a while. Anyway, this is coming out right before Easter, so happy Easter. Hope everybody has a really wonderful Good Friday Easter weekend. And the trees are blooming. The grass is growing. I've already cut mine twice. And wear a mask. I recommend that highly. Those old COVID masks or whatever you got to put on when you go out and mow the grass and you're outside if it does bother you, because that does help. But gosh, if you're prone to it like I am, I feel sorry for you. It's just not a fun thing to have to deal with, is it? Not at all. Hey, have a good one, and I will see you soon here, and I'll see you every Friday, Thursday, if you really get on there and take a look, on another VO podcast. And thanks for supporting both. See you next time.
This has been The VO Life with Troy Holden on Spotify, Apple, Google, and more.